My name's Debbie Hicks. I've been an activist for most of my adult life, actually, on all different sorts of issues. But for the last 3 years, I've taken up lots of actions and campaigning on various issues relating to the attack on our civil liberties, on our freedoms, on our rights in the UK, and all sorts of things around lockdown, which some of you may have heard about. Obviously, a lot of people know that I got into all sorts of trouble for being at protests, organising protests, filming a hospital during lockdown. And the last year, in fact, it's probably coming up to about 18 months now, actually, I have taken up the issue of saving cash, keeping cash in the UK, because to me, as soon as we got the issue of vaccine passports out the way, and that was early 2022, when it became clear that they weren't going to go ahead with them, I immediately thought I've got to turn my attention now to cash, because to me, and I'm sure I hope you agree, Tony, to me it's like the central issue, at the centre of everything that this is all about.
Well, it does seem to be, but can you just explain, because most of us don't do this campaigning work that you do. You actually spend a lot of your own personal private time not getting paid to travel around the country, do speeches, talks and this sort of thing, and also get involved in spending a lot of your time organising these sorts of events. What was it that made you take that step from sort of being an ordinary citizen of some kind to saying, well, no, actually, this is a mission?
Yeah, no, thank you. No, absolutely. I'm just terrified, Tony, about the future for children, for the next, future generations. I've got a teenage son. It's not just about kids, it's about all of us. If we've got families and friends, and we want to live in a world where we've just got basic rights. And I just felt I have to do something. I can't just carry on and put my head down and ignore it. So this is why I do what I do. And I suppose in a strange kind of way, I mean, I've been through hell the last 3 years with all the harassment and the abuse and intimidation from the media, the mainstream media, and from the police and the courts. I've really have been harassed. So that is the negative part of it. But the other side of that, Tony, and I always try and look at the positives with everything, is that it's given me a platform. It's given me a platform and a following to do things and to get the message out. And so I've used it. I've kind of turned it around and used it. And yes, sometimes it's an unthankful task. I mean, it's that's the way it is if you're an activist. But I always feel it's like anything, you've got to keep chipping away, haven't you? And this is why I go out and do this. And I go around and do talks, organise rallies, organise direct action where we go out into communities and leaflet, talk to businesses, talk to people in shops, because that's really important to me, the smaller businesses in particular, about keeping cash and the threat of losing cash in the UK if they introduce central bank digital currency. And we'll come
to that in a minute, Debbie, but I just wanted to recap, because one of the reasons many people don't do this is because they're afraid of being arrested, they're afraid of having their assets seized, this sort of thing, having to go to court, all this kind of thing is, and I just wonder, because you've had several brushes with the law, I wonder if you could just take us through how that's gone, because obviously it's not deterred you.
No, it's toughened me up, actually, Tony, in a strange way. It makes you tough and more resilient, and you have to detach yourself somewhat, I think, to the experiences you go through. And I have been. I was first arrested. I think you were there, actually. I was first arrested in Stroud in, I think it was November 2020. I think it was, where I organised with some people in Stroud. I'm sure you might know some of those people. We organised a rally. It was the height of the lockdown. It was very, very intense and very controlled. Police state. It was really a full-on police state. And as you know, there was just a few speeches for no more than 20 minutes, half an hour, and I was arrested quite quite brutally and charged for organising that rally and charged for being there. That particular offence I was actually cleared of by the district judge in Cirencester. So I was arrested then, and then in December 2020, I decided to take a walk around Gloucester Hospital during the lockdown and film the corridors. The purpose was, I had heard that the hospital was very, very quiet and that there was not really many people there at all. And because at the time the mainstream media were really building up this narrative that the hospitals were completely overrun, and in particular Gloucester Hospital was being reported as being overrun with people, I wanted to see for myself, even though I knew that's what it was going to be. I just wanted to document it. So I walked around, I filmed it, and as you know, it kind of went viral. It attracted a lot of attention, and of course the authorities were not happy, and I was arrested a couple of days later and charged with a public order offence for doing that. And that, together with a charge for being at a rally a few months later with Piers Corbyn, because I helped run Piers Corbyn's mayoral campaign, I took, because I was convicted for that, and I was convicted for being at this later rally with Piers Corbyn in 2021. Later on, which was last year, 2022, this is how long these things take when you're going through the courts, I finally managed to appeal. I crowdfunded, and thanks to all the amazing people that helped me do that, because it did cost a lot of money. And I finally got it to the High Court, Tony. It took a lot of hard work. They turned it down the first time when we had to ask for a hearing. And then they finally agreed for me to have a High Court appeal. And it was two cases. It was a High Court appeal for being convicted for filming the hospital, the public order offence. And it was also a judicial review on why I was arrested for being at a rally during lockdown when there were lots of other cases, which I'm sure you heard about at the time, other campaign groups, Extinction Rebellion, the Sarah Everard people that were cleared. And in the High Court, some of them were cleared as well at that same period of time for being out at gatherings. So we took that to the High Court, and unfortunately, not really a surprise, I suppose, to many, I didn't win either of those. So that's the end of the journey. So yeah, I have been through it with the judicial system, right to the top of the system, I tried. I wanted to give it a go because I thought it was important to try and see if there's still some elements of justice.
Well, the thing is, you would never know. If you hadn't tried, you'd never know what would have happened, and you'd have been bugging you probably for the rest of your life. But look, there was another aspect to this hospital filming, and that is that you've got a very strange situation was going on at the time, where actually people didn't trust the hospital system. They knew that people were going into hospitals and actually catching COVID, and so there was an enormous reluctance of people to even approach the system. At the time, I spoke to many people who were ill but were just not going to go anywhere near a hospital because of the fear of catching COVID and dying of COVID and that sort of thing. And I think it was quite important that you kind of helped burst that little bubble. It seemed to me that the whole thing was an attempt to just run it through the television. So what is said on the television is is the only perception that people will have. So actually very important you going in and doing that. But anyway, you're now on to cash. This whole idea of the central bank digital currency seems to be sitting there growing and actually waiting until there is some sort of denouement with the national debt climbing all the time, unpayable. And so once somebody finally says, I'm sorry, we're running out of money, this central bank digital currency is sitting there on the sidelines ready to take over. So can you just tell us a bit about it and why you're campaigning for cash as against the, what is effectively like the chip and pin cards, the credit cards, the electronic money system?
Yeah, why am I campaigning? I think I just touched on this just now. To me, everything that's happening which is that we're moving to a totalitarian society. There's lots of arguments about what kind of ideological system is. I'm not sure that's worth me getting into, because I think there's all sorts of ways of seeing it, and I don't think we've even got any proper academic analysis at the moment. Surprise, surprise, because people are so controlled now on what this. I mean, I'd call it a technocracy. That's what I'd call it. But we are moving very, very quickly to this full-on totalitarian system, and it's unprecedented to me in the sense of I can't think of a time where there hasn't been a society with cash. If you look historically, it's so when you take away cash, which to me is, put aside the arguments that obviously it's subject to inflation and it's still controlled. Of course it is. It's still part of that system. But when people use cash, it's not trackable. It's not traceable. It gives you that freedom to spend your money where and how you want to without having an identity link to it. Whereas, as you just mentioned with the chip and pin or your debit credit cards, or even worse, these phone apps that lots of people use now, is you are directly linking to the banking system and their AI and their algorithms, so they can see exactly who you are and what you're doing, which, to be honest, they've been building up that data for years and years. It's not anything new, this kind of system of data that shows how people spend their money and what they're doing. So I think it's been building for a long time. I just feel that now we're seeing a very, and I'll come on to that in a moment about what's happened to me and it's happening to other people. It's moving very quickly now to phase out. I wouldn't say phase out cash, actually, because I don't think that's what they're going to do, Tony. After everything that I've learned and everything that I've been reading, they're not going to get rid of cash, but they're going to make it impossible for the likes of you and me, normal people, to access cash. And as you know, it's in the news nearly every week, isn't it? Banks are closing down, cash points are closing down everywhere. So people can't access cash. And the town that my mum lives in, and my husband's parents, which is a town called Malmesbury, which is, it's about 10 miles, 15 miles from Swindon, is it's probably a good example of a lot of towns now. It doesn't have any banks. All the banks have closed down. And what happens now is that there's what they call the bank van. Have you heard of these banking vans that are going around rural, like towns and communities? And it comes once a week. And apparently the queue is down the road, Tony, for people to use this mobile bank. And what happens is, what I've been told is the queue is so long, a lot of people, it closes before people get served. So this is how desperate it's becoming, is that there's just no access to cash, to, for businesses to deposit their cash or to take out cash. And this is the insidious way I think they're doing it. They're forcing us, it's coercion, isn't it, into businesses into going cashless, because they've got no way of dealing with cash. And I speak to businesses all the time with what I'm doing, and this is what they're saying: we want to use cash, we want to deposit and pay our staff in cash, but can't get to a bank to do it. So, and a lot of, obviously, people don't want to be carrying cash around for periods of time in their cars, or so there is that level of security. I understand that. So I feel that this is what the way that they're going to do it, is that they're going to phase it in with all sorts of coercion and nudges and rewards as well, not just the punishments, the rewards that people will get if they do go cashless, or if they do buy into these. Oh
yeah, I mean, for example, the businesses I speak to are saying that actually banking cash is becoming more and more difficult. As you say, the branches are closing, and actually more expensive, so that it's actually costing them money to bank cash. So obviously there is an impetus there for all businesses to use as little cash as possible. And many of the businesses are now saying, for example, that they will not take cash. And they just refuse. Although actually, of course, if your credit card is over its limit, then of course they would take cash instead. If you've just had a meal in a restaurant or something, I'm sure they will take cash. The trick, as I suppose, is to always take enough change in order to so you don't have to leave them an extra £5, £10, £20. So take a bit of change with you so you can leave them, even with the places that say they're cashless. But what I actually wanted to say was, I've recently come back from the Bilderberg conference in Portugal, and I noticed, I was over there for about a week, that there's almost the opposite in Portugal, where most businesses that you go to, shops, etc., actually seem to prefer cash. And if you wave a card at them, they look down their nose at you. No, shake their heads.
Oh, that's good. That's interesting. Yeah. So it's yeah, I mean, it's looking at all the countries, and there's a list growing all the time. There's so many countries at the moment that are piloting central bank digital currencies, and it's a strange. The UK is a strange example, actually, because I think we're a little bit behind in terms of introducing it or bringing in a proper pilot. I mean, obviously we've just had the consultation. I'm sure you're aware of that. That's just closed. That they've done online a consultation, which has had a huge.
This is really important to understand where we are. So, number one, what is the difference between just using your debit card or a central bank digital currency? And second, where are we at in the UK with this? Is it going to happen anytime soon?
So sorry, the first point. Well, what's the difference between sort of using a card and using cash? Is that what you're asking? Yeah. What's the difference between using what does it mean?
What's the difference between electronic money on your debit card and a central bank digital currency?
What's the difference? Well, the central bank digital currency, the value, if you like, of money in the economy is going to be based on a new system, which is already kind of creeping in. Actually, I think it's already kind of started in phases of credits, in terms of what we do as citizens, as good citizens, in terms of either your social credits or your carbon credits, which is the other part of this. So obviously, as a citizen, you will get more credits if your social behaviour, your consumer behaviour fits the programs that they're going to introduce and reward you for. So, you know, what you buy and what you eat that matches up with a lower carbon footprint, or that's better for your health, better for the environment. You know, if you're using a petrol or diesel car, your carbon footprint that goes with that. Also, I mean, it won't just extend to consumer stuff, it will extend to health as well, in terms of what are you doing to look after your health, how that's going to be monitored, what things you eat that contribute to that, and alcohol, or if you smoke. It's just a non-exhaustive kind of list of different things that are going to be used to build a kind of a credit system, an economy that's based on the value and the data harvesting, because this is all about data, the data economy, which is what the World Economic Forum have been talking about for years. It's going to be the big data economy, and how they use that to build, you know, because obviously this economic system we're in is failing, isn't it? You know, the money system that's based on, how could we put it, money that the banks make out of thin air, basically, you know, the out of credit, all the credit that's been sort of building up, that's not based on any value for years. That system is what you're talking about, is coming to an end. It's completely over. So this new system is where we are the kind of the value as human beings. It's like a mass slave system.
It does sound a little bit like China, because they have a social credit system there, don't they, where individuals basically are profiled, every single person on a database in China, and they're given a score, a sort of green light or a red light or amber light, depending on how much they conform to what the Chinese Communist Party says they shouldn't be doing. Yeah,
a lot of people are comparing it to that. Although I have heard, and I don't know, I haven't spent any time in China, but from people that have been there, I have heard that there's also penalties that are levied at corporations and banks there, that fits into a more communist model, I suppose. So I think it might be different in that way. But yeah, absolutely. The citizens are profiled. They have a social credit file, and which enables them access to different things, or it doesn't. And we've all seen the footage online, haven't we, of where they can't do things because, especially the activists, I think in particular, where it cuts off because they haven't got the credits to do it. And
is there any evidence that this kind of system might be brought in the UK or in Europe, though?
Yes, there is. If you look on the Bank of England website, and it also links to the Treasury, there's a whole section on there. They don't actually use the word social credits because obviously it's quite controversial, and they don't want to be, sort of the whole conspiracy theory type stuff. But it's programmable money is the term that they use, which is exactly the same. It means the same thing. So yeah, they're not hiding it. It's all on there.
What about the close down of bank accounts? Because this is something which we've just been hearing about with Nigel Farage at Coutts last week, although he didn't say the name of the bank. And is there any evidence that this has been done for political reasons? He's had his bank account closed because I hear anecdotally about quite a few people, and I understand you have yourself had this problem.
Yes, well, obviously the bank, about a month ago, I had my bank account frozen. I've got a bank and I've been meaning to change it for some time because I'm so busy I haven't. My mistake. Can't always be absolutist about everything. But we had a joint account, me and my husband, with, like a current account we use every day with HSBC. The worst bank, I know, it's absolutely the worst one for all this. And about a month ago, my card was rejected at several cash points, and I was at, sometimes that does happen. Different cash points don't work, etc. So when it happened the first time, I didn't sort of take any notice. But then after a few occasions, I thought, oh, something's going on here. So I didn't get home till late. The next day, my husband phoned HSBC, and as you know, you get through to some call centre overseas, and it's very, very hard. And they said, yes, the card's been frozen, not the account at that point. The card's been frozen because Mrs. Hicks, and this is how strange it was. It was like it was all about me, even though I've got a joint account. Mrs. Hicks withdraws a lot of cash, and it's flagged up our anti, fraud team. It's been flagged up to them. It's come up as an issue, that we've had to freeze it. I've said to my husband, because he always phones them up if there's a problem, he sort of complained, and he said, oh, okay, don't worry, we'll unfreeze that straight away. He explained that I'm a big cash user and I use cash, and there's nothing suspicious in it. So we thought, oh, that's okay. Next day, my husband went onto his banking app, because he does online banking. I don't do it, but he's got an app on his phone, and he said, oh, the banking app's been frozen. I said, oh, why have they done that? So I said, oh, you better phone them up. So he phoned them up again, and they said, oh, to be honest, I don't think they had a clue on the phone, because I think it was way beyond them at that level what was going on. And they said, oh, we don't know why that's happened, but we have got on the file that a letter was sent to Mrs. Hicks, so it's about me again, to Mrs. Hicks, with some security questions that she never responded to. Now, we never got a letter, Tony. We have moved house. They said it was sent to our previous address, but we have everything on a redirection, so it didn't seem likely that we missed that. Nothing came through to us. And they said, so that is why we froze the account. So I said to my husband, well, hold on, it was about cash yesterday, and now it's about a letter not being answered. This is really strange. And again, okay, sorry about this, we'll unfreeze the account. Again, next day, so this was Monday, this was all over the weekend. Monday, account still frozen, and so we're getting really concerned now. Phone up again, and it's something different this time, Tony. And this time, oh, Mrs. Hicks we've too many security issues now, and we can't unlock this account. She needs to go into a branch with ID and verify that she is who she is. And it's like, oh, for goodness sake, I've had this account for years, always use this. Why do I need to do this? Okay, I'll go in. So I went into, I think it was the Monday, this was about a month ago now. I went into HSBC in Swindon, because that's the nearest one that has staff in to where I live, because as we've just talked about, there's no banks anymore. And how can I put this politely? Staff are absolutely useless, like a chocolate teapot. I mean, really, it's not like years ago where you had a bank manager that was kind of in charge and knew what was going on. Really just administrative staff that hadn't got a clue. And I sat there in the office with this young man for about an hour, and he really just which is the problem we've got with everything these days, was really just reading off stuff off the screen to me. He wasn't dealing with any of my complaints. So I went through it all with him, and he took my ID, and I said, I want an explanation. What is going on? I said, I've got all these contradictory reasons why our account's been frozen. I want to know what's going on, why it's been frozen. And then he pulled up some banking policy from HSBC, and he claimed that because when we moved house, my husband, because my husband did it, change the address for our joint account, he said that because I didn't also contact the bank to say that I had moved as well, this was why it had all been frozen. I said, well, hold on, over the last few days, you've given me 3 other explanations. So he pulled it up on the screen, and I said, well, why is it then that you've taken a year, because this was over a year ago that we moved, and you've taken a year to flag this up, that I didn't change the address. And, you know, we've had accounts with you for years, a joint account, and it's never been an issue before when just one of us changes it. So he said, well, look, read it here. So he turns the screen round to me, Tony, and this is how Orwellian it all is. And the statement on the screen, the HSBC policy, actually says the opposite. And I'm reading it out. It actually says only one person from the joint account can change the details. And I'm reading it out to him, and he's like, no. And I'm like, oh my God, what is this? I felt like I was in a scene from 1984. They're saying something different to what he's telling me. So we're going around in circles and circles, and I'm not getting a satisfactory answer. And of course, in the back of my head, I'm thinking, this is about me, isn't it? And who I am. But of course, they're not going to. And to be honest, I don't think he even knew any of that kind of information. It was just at that level. It's administrative, isn't it? Like it is in any organisation. I don't think he really knew what was going on. So anyway, I got very angry, and I said, look, I want to withdraw all my cash from this bank. Why should you have my money after what you've done to me? You've stopped my access to my own money. You've treated me like a criminal. You've made me try and jump through hoops. I said, I want to take all my cash out. So I managed to get all the cash out, and I said I want to close the account down, and he said that was fine. And went back to my husband and said, look, we need to immediately try and open up another account. But until we could do that, we had to make sure the other account was open to move, sort of payments that we make, bills, etc., over. So a month later, and this is where I'm getting really worried now as well, we've been trying to open up a co-op account. Maybe that's a bad choice. I think it is now. And we're still waiting, and I'm really concerned now that there's a problem. But the problem we still got, Tony, is that the account is still frozen. We still can't. Luckily, we've got other accounts that we managed to got, so we're just about surviving. But this HSBC account is still, and he'd even told me on that day he'd unlocked it all. This is how insane it all is. It's still frozen. We still can't do anything with it, and we're still waiting for a co-op account to, even though we've sent all the ID off.
Well, I mean, there's a few things here. I mean, first of all, it seems quite clear that somebody at HSBC has decided to gaslight you, or just simply lie to you about and try to get you to voluntarily leave by coming out with all sorts of different lies about why they don't want your account. And most importantly, have you actually got the money that was in HSBC? Is it now out and in your hands?
Well, I managed to withdraw the cash that day. He allowed me to do that on that day, but even though obviously there's, I don't know, whatever it is to keep the account open, there's a little bit of money still left in there, which I had to keep to try and transfer to the co-op with all the other things going on. We still can't use the account. The online banking is frozen, so my husband can't access that. And we've got no cards because they froze the cards, and they haven't, they promised us they were going to send us new ones, and they haven't replaced them. So we both, and that's my husband as well now, he can't use it either. So the whole account is now not, I mean, to me, it was me to start with, but now the whole account is frozen. So I'm just hoping the co-op account, there's no easy choices with this, but I knew that co-op was more cash friendly, so I went for a co-op account. But I'm now hearing that, I don't know if you've heard the news, that Louise Creffield, who does Save Our Rights, has just put up a post, was it today or yesterday, and she's had exactly the same happen to her, Tony. And that was with co-op as well. She's had her account that she uses for Save Our Rights has been frozen, and her private personal account has been frozen. So it's happening to so many people now. And I
suppose we can think about the the government we've got at the moment, which is Goldman Sachs. Basically, is Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, is from Goldman Sachs. These are merchant bankers. They are funders of the Democratic Party in the United States. They're extremely political, obviously, wanting to choose the president of America. And the idea, so what we've now got, it seems, is a political system that has allowed the banks to get into the position where they can just simply shut off the account of anybody that they don't like. Now, all this business with Nigel Farage, though, him having his Coutts bank account closed down, some have said, well, it's just anybody who has got less than £1 million, they're shutting their accounts, and it's nothing to do with his politics.
I mean, obviously, somebody like Nigel Farage, who's got a big profile, very well known, he's had a lot of media attention about this, hasn't he, on GB News? Now, I'm not doubting for a moment that's happened to him, but I also think to close his account down is with the purpose of knowing that will go viral with the mass media and send a message out to people that if you've got views that are different to the prevailing political culture at the moment, then, not that I'm a fan of Nigel Farage by any means, but he obviously has some different opinions to the on lots of these issues. And I have no doubt this is political. I knew it was coming, Tony. I mean, the mad thing is, I've been out for the last 18 months, as I said, and I say this every time I do public speaking. I said they will come for the activists first. And that's exactly what they're doing, because, and that also tells me, I was thinking about it before we got on the phone, actually, with all this that's going on in France, and the civil unrest there is almost like they're anticipating that things are going to kick off, so to try and shut down any potential opposition. That's what it feels like.
With Nigel, and I mean, I do support him. He nearly died in a plane crash. He led the force that persuaded Cameron and the Tories that they really did have to have a referendum, which was one of the biggest turnouts we've seen, far greater than the general elections, because people understood that, whether we're ruled by Brussels or Westminster makes a big difference. So it's worth turning out and voting. Whereas if you look at the difference between Sunak and Starmer, I think we'll have a very low turnout in next year's general election, for example. So I do support Farage, and he's right to say what he wants to say. And,
absolutely.
But the thing is, there are people which was not reported by the BBC, but there are several people who have come out and made it public that they have got balances well below £1 million with Coutts, and Coutts have said nothing to them. So it does seem as if there's a kind of political campaign ongoing.
Absolutely, I think it is, and I think we're going to see and hear more. To be honest, I'm not sure if this is even that new, although I think it seems to be accelerating with activists, because I'm hearing stuff all the time at the moment. Somebody put me in touch with a lady the other day who's also had I can't remember, it was Lloyds Bank, I think, who's had, so I don't think it matters what bank it is, they're all part of the same thing, as we know. It's happening to all sorts of people. But apparently there's a Facebook group that's been around for quite a few years, of people that just have their accounts shut down without any reason or any notice. So I think this has been happening for some time. I just think it's kind of picking up pace with the political nature of it now, in terms of this is what's going to happen to you if you speak up. This is what's going to happen if you go against, particularly somebody like me. I mean, of course, it's not a coincidence. I've been, really pushing for activists in this country last year to do more on cash, which they have been, which is amazing. But they don't want that, and they don't want businesses, which is what we've been trying to do, get all the small businesses to promote cash. They don't want that, because because that is, I mean, cash has gone up in circulation the last year by quite a staggering amount in this country. It's gone up by about 15%, I believe. They don't talk about that, and that is the main reason.
Well, it went right down during the pandemic, for sure. Anyway, also on this idea of closing accounts down, I going back on the internet, you'll see in 2014 there was a whole load of bank accounts by HSBC closed down of the pro-Palestinian campaigns, in fact, charities that were sending food to Palestine, this sort of thing, suddenly closed the bank accounts of several prominent British Muslims, HSBC did. And in late July that year, Mohammed Kosbar, chairman of Finsbury Park Mosque, he was astonished to receive a letter out of the blue from his bankers, HSBC. The letter informed him his bank account was being closed. It explains HSBC Bank has recently conducted a general review and has concluded that the provision of banking services to Finsbury Park Mosque now falls outside of our risk appetite. Now, this is Finsbury Park Mosque, the same mosque where there were as a kind of MI5 cell in there that the actual people, like Mohammed Kosbar, the chairman, had been reporting to the police saying, we've got these nutters who are trying to infiltrate our mosque. And yet he's the one, not the nutters, that has his bank account closed. So we're in the week where the Israeli army has just gone charging into the West Bank, into Jenin, and killing Palestinians, bulldozing their homes, bulldozing some homes, potentially with people alive inside the homes being bulldozed. And so I wonder if there is some sort of link to this. I suppose it's a political campaign, Debbie, a Zionist campaign, and a much wider movement to identify specific people, profile them, and make it very difficult, if not impossible, for them to be active financially.
Absolutely. I think you're right. I mean, especially when, you just quoted those examples. We know it's been going on for some time politically with different people. But I think at the moment, when we've heard recently that, that there was a direct there was a list that the government was sharing with MI5 and with counter-terrorism police during the lockdown of people on social media to watch directly. Now, I'm not naive. I've had a lot of harassment. Of course, the people like myself, even you, people that are independent journalists that question all this. We're all going to be on these. We know this historically is what they do to people. We're going to be on these lists. So it's not that far-fetched to then think that now there's another sort of targeted list of people that are going to have their bank accounts frozen, limited, shut down, and it's only going to keep growing. That's the problem. And as I said to somebody today, I said I hate to say this, it's the words from that poem, isn't it, from the pastor in Nazi Germany. They come for us first, and they're going to come for you the rest of the, because that's what programmable money is. It's about attacking people and stopping opposition, and they will go for the general public. That's what's coming.
Yeah, it's worth mentioning too that I used to run a website called cultureshop.org, which you can still find on the old Wayback Machine, where we used to, in Bristol, actually we were making some films ourselves, and we were shooting a lot of footage at actions and selling it to the news, which was a reasonable income we were making for that. But we were also selling documentaries in DVD form and on the old VHS form online, so people could just sort of buy them. In fact, many of them are now sitting there in libraries around the world that we sent out, many of these films and documentaries. And I had a very similar thing happen in 2013. Where the Co-op Bank, which we had a business account with them, started writing letters every week saying we need to see birth certificates, death certificates. There was just basically a wall of, and I missed one of these emails. In fact, I think it was letters they were sending through the post. I was away on holiday, that's right, and got back from holiday to find this letter there, replied to it, and it turned out that they'd asked me for the information within 1 week. And so they just sent me in the post a check with the balance from that account, and they just closed the account. And there was no real explanation at all as to why they'd done it. And of course, a company without a bank account cannot operate. We had to basically just shut the business. And we weren't doing a lot of business either, Debbie. We were talking about probably a turnover of about £3,000 or £4,000 a year, virtually nothing.
Yep.
Sending these things out. So and they were saying that we were being flagged because they believed we were using the account for money laundering.
Yeah, and that's the problem, because a lot of people have said that to me. Oh, you've got to take it to the FCA, and it's like, well, the problem is when you look into, and this is what they've been very cleverly doing for sort of decades now, since the last financial crash, even more so, is building up all these new regulations on money laundering, anti-terrorism, all sorts of, regulations about that can be used to do this. And when you look into that, of course, it's all written in a way, isn't it, where if you make a complaint, they have the right to do it. And so it's, as much as, it's appalling what's happened to me and is happening to other people, I know that if I take this further, I'm not going to get anywhere, because that's what they'll come back and say is they're anti-fraud or whatever security things have been triggered because of strange things, which comes under the regulations. So they have the right.
It's well worth, I think, writing to your MPs about it if anyone has a similar problem, to let them know. A lot of the time, you just don't think to do that. So, and I didn't at the time with our DVD business account. I didn't think to do it. I should have done. And I think now once you see these sort of patterns emerging. And also, of course, picking up the phone and dialing into your local phone-ins and talking to letting the world know using that route possibly. But also, of course, Farage, Debbie, is fronting this big campaign against central bank digital currencies. Well, I say it's big. I see little adverts for it popping up on the Google ads everywhere. And I find it astonishing that this campaign was launched just a week before he was told by Coots, no, you're not having your account. So, it's also quite obvious. I mean, Farage is a well-known character, that there definitely does seem to be some sort of link. So with the central bank digital currencies, and I know you do quite a lot of talks around and flagging this up to people, is there anything we can actually do about this?
I think there is. I mean, it sounds all doom and gloom and all this stuff is awful that's happening to us. And, this is going to continue. Of course it is. They're going to try everything to run it in. But I think, as I've touched on, there's signs of hope. And actually, what I'm going to come to, and maybe that's a good thing to sort of conclude on as well as the positives, is I actually think a lot of this, what they're trying to do in the long run, is not going to work. Using cash, I always say this, and it's obviously very simple, but just using cash as much as possible is one of the biggest things that every individual can do in this country to fight back and to try and claim back your freedom and your privacy about how you spend your money. And it's not only does sort of injecting that cash back into the small businesses mean that they have to then look at ways where they can use cash and sort of how to deposit it, but it also means all the big data, the banks and the big data and the corporations that all work on big data, it restricts their access to that information that we're giving them all for free when we're using our cards, when we're using all these loyalty cards, because they're another big part of this. So just use cash as much as you can, because if it's going up and up in circulation, which it has the last year because of the way the economy is, people are using cash more. If you've got a growing cash economy, and even, I mean, I've even been talking to people that run medium and large size businesses, and even they say, well, we still, cash is still a big part of what we do. And they even concede, that if it goes, it really is going to destroy even some of the bigger businesses in this country.
Yeah, I mean, we've both been saying, and I think we probably both agree, that the current system is at the end of the line. So what should replace it if it's not a central bank digital currency? It seems to me that there isn't a plan B. A plan A is already well laid, and the central bank digital currency is virtually ready to go. What about a plan B?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, there's a lot of discussions about what kind of money system it should be replaced with, and I know that the new chartist, I don't know what they call themselves these days, I've forgotten his name now, Justin Walker. I don't know if you know Justin Walker, have you heard of him? And they talk about something called the Bradbury Pound. I don't know if you've heard about that. And it's this idea, not really that radical actually, that we kind of try and return to this idea where the value of our money system is what's created in the community. So if somebody, for instance, which is also logical, really, isn't it? That's how money should be created. So if somebody, I don't know, builds a new house, and the value, the builders, the value that creates, that's the money that goes back into the economy, and how the current, the money is valued, rather than this fractional reserve banking system where bankers are just making up figures on a screen.
Yeah, that's that fiat currency where they just the money doesn't actually exist at all.
Yeah,
they just press a button.
Huge bubble that we're seeing.
They have a license basically to print money, which is exactly what they're doing. So this Bradbury pound is a or was anyway, it could be done again. It was a form of money which was directly created by the Treasury. Unfortunately, Gordon Brown seems to have, when he was Chancellor and when he was Prime Minister, actually when he was Chancellor, he handed over the power to set interest rates to the Bank of England, which is, one step removed. And in fact, the City of London, these big investment banks now really control both the Bank of England and the Treasury. And so there's very little chance of that. But maybe, I suppose, with some sort of radical person in the Treasury, there may be the Treasury starting to issue money again. But that seems to be basically the only way out. Anyway, Deb, what's the best way to follow your work? I don't know if you've got any rallies up and coming on social media.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we're sort of talking about really macro type sort of stuff where we talk about different systems, but what I'm doing is really micro on the ground, just getting people to do stuff to try and change it from the grassroots up. So yeah, I go around and I do talks and organise rallies. I've been doing a lot of the 15-minute city stuff as well, as I'm sure you're aware, because it's all, controlling people's movements about where they live, which is what 15-minute neighbourhoods are all about. It's also about having a money system where you program money to stop people traveling to certain places. So I've been doing a lot of that as well, and really sort of going into the businesses with the leaflets in towns and cities and talking to them. But where am I next? I've had a bit of a break because I'm in the process of moving house, but I'm going up to, where are we? It's the 5th today, the 5th July. Next Saturday, which is the 15th of July, I'm going to be in Warrington. I think it's Warrington, which is sort of between Liverpool and Manchester, isn't it, that area? And I think it's 12 o'clock. I think it's the High Street. We're going to be meeting, and it's going to be very, very much direct action. We're going to go out in teams with some of the groups up there, people that do lots of activism up there, and we're going to go around in the shops and businesses, give them flyers to put in their windows and talk to them about keeping cash. Yeah, so that's very hands-on what we're doing next Saturday. Yeah, but if people want to follow about what we're doing, because I haven't sort of put any more dates up beyond that, because there's lots of festivals coming up over the next couple of months that I'm speaking at. There is a Telegram group called, if you use Telegram, I think it's, I'm trying to remember the way you find Telegram, it's t.me/keep it cash. I think that's how you find it. t.me/keep it cash. I always put all the dates that are coming up on there if people want to come out and join us. We do, like I said, we do a mixture of things. Sometimes it's rallies and speaking, giving out leaflets, and other times it's getting out there and talking to the business. Yes,
Debbie, my own favourite is the £20 note. At least it looks like it's a £20 note folded in half. And then when you open it up, it says, keep cash alive. Cash is freedom. Use it or lose it.
I've seen those. They're not mine, but they are really good, those, aren't they? I've seen them. Yeah, it's very, very effective. There's all sorts. I mean, this has been the amazing thing over the last year, which has obviously got the authorities quite worried, I think, is all sorts of groups. I think there's people in Bristol doing it as well, Tony. All sorts of groups going out, leafleting, talking to businesses, giving out things to shoppers in different areas, all sorts of work that's going on that people don't even hear about, I think. So there is what I'd call a very British sort of resistance to the attack on cash.
Yeah, and that's the quiet revolution going on. It says that cash is freedom. Use it or lose it, it says on the little leaflet, which you would, if you see a £20 note folded in half, you think, oh, that's a £20 note folded in half. I think I'll have that. But when you pick it up and open it up, you realise it's actually quite a clever little bit of propaganda. It says everything will be digital. All money will be dependent upon the internet, vulnerable to cyber attacks, power cuts and tech failure. Well, that's quite appropriate. I mean, I've seen people trying to use apps to get on the bus and finding that their blasted phone just runs out of power just as they're about to flash it onto the driver.
Yeah, it's terrific.
It's a bit of a joke, really. So all your money transactions, it says, will be monitored and controlled by the state. Well, also, of course, by the private banks, which is kind of taking over from the state in many ways, these massive transnational companies. Access to your money can be cut off by banks and government, as we've just been discussing here, and also as seen recently in Canada and Australia. So it's worth mentioning, isn't it, that the Canadian campaigners, this is exactly what happened to the anti-lockdown campaigners in Canada and Australia, is they had bank accounts frozen and shut down, Debbie.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all going around to all of us, and it's I don't think people believe, because I had someone question me the other day, oh, Debbie's stupid. If it wouldn't be that they've done it, and it's like, well, what do you think this is all about? What is programmable money all about? It is about stopping political opposition. Is one of the main objectives of it, is to stop any, we're seeing the attack on all fronts, aren't we, with the new Public Order Act, the fact they want to get rid of the Human Rights Act. All of this is about stopping political opposition. And
the Strike Act as well, where they're saying that people aren't going to be able to go on strike. I mean, this is against the UN Charter on Human Rights and all this sort of thing. So, I mean, it's in a way, we ought to really wind up this discussion, but I think of it a bit like money, a bit like a religion, so back in the old days, we used to have morals and we used to think, well, I want to do this and that because of such and such is right and such is wrong. Nowadays, we're more on the back foot. And so many of our decisions are just based on, well, if I do this, am I going to get more money or am I going to get less money? And it's almost like a kind of faith, but especially when you look at the fact that the money that you've got in your pocket has got no actual intrinsic value at all. It's almost like we have faith in this piece of paper.
Yeah. Well, that's a bigger sort of philosophical debate, isn't it? Is that, because of secular societies where we've moved away from religion, what has replaced it? I mean, that was the whole debate about the lockdowns and sort of like the worship of being about this virus and about these vaccines. It was all about that, wasn't it? About having something that brings people together, a sense of, like a sort of a replacement for religion. And the worship of money, earning money and the status that comes with it is what our society seems to live on, doesn't it? And I think that's how they're going to try and bring this in, is the rewards. The reward, it will be heavy on the rewards to start with, a little bit like your Tesco club card, isn't it, which I stopped using some time ago. But that idea is, it's you're going to be awarded, and people like that. They like to feel like virtuous and good, moral, upstanding citizens. I am being rewarded. So people, if they start bringing those in, people will like that they're being, awarded for being good, and they won't see it as a bad thing.
Well, look, I know you're formerly of the Labour Party. We've got Keir Starmer about to take over probably, since the Conservatives seem to be doing a controlled demolition on themselves. And he was at Davos earlier this year saying, talking to Emily Maitlis at the BBC, saying, I prefer Davos than I do to Westminster. Now, hang on a minute, because Davos is this private money club. It may be that he's part of this new religion, Debbie.
Yeah, I think he is. Absolutely. I think most of them are, actually. I think in Australia, in a sad kind of way, there's a great big hole, isn't there, in our society, in Western societies, where people don't have a sense of what it means to be human, which to me is what religion's all about. To me, is about what it means to be human and a good human, and that it's all gone. And I think there's this relentless search, which people perhaps are not aware of, inside of themselves to find some meaning to everything. And I think this is cleverly how fascism or totalitarian systems develop, is they kind of fill that void, that need in people, when there's a gap that's missing in people's lives and society. And I think that that's what's happening, and they've certainly got a new society planned for us.
Well, yeah, so it's okay. You can't really vote for this Goldman Sachs Tory party, whose religion is money, as we know, nor the Labour Party, who's the same religion, with under Starmer anyway. Although Corbyn actually did seem to have a bit more of a heart, so somebody had actually, had independent moral judgment as well. But then we've got the Greens, who are the zero carbon brigade, I suppose. So I suppose we're living in a system where the system is kind of broken. But anyway, if you could just remind us how to follow you on social media, Debbie, that'd be lovely, please.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So it's, as I said, there's a Telegram channel, t.me/keep it cash. There's also a WordPress site, www.wordpress.com/keep it cash, where I do put up like a schedule of things on there. There's also flyers and other stuff people can download on there as well. So those are the main things. There's not
any Twitter.
I don't really use Twitter. I'm not. I have got my own personal Twitter page under my name if people want to follow that, but I don't. Yeah, I'm not really a Twitter person, unfortunately. Yeah, I should.
No, listen, disconnecting from all this stuff is not necessarily a bad thing at all, especially with nutcases like Elon Musk, who's trying to plug all our brains into the internet in China.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry, can you say something?
No, I was just going to say, I was just going to say, finally, I mean, I know it all sounds really, really depressing about all this with cash, but when you think, I mean, one of the other things I was just going to say to finish in, when you consider that about 40% of the global economy, and in this country as well, is an illegal economy. It's what they might call a shadow economy based on illegal activities, all sorts of things, and that is a cash economy. Cash is they're never going to get rid of cash. They just want to make it really hard for us to use it. So we have to turn the tables, and that's our job. People, you're out there talking about it, and that's great. You're playing your role, activists as well. It's our job to just make sure people are using it as much as possible, and the economic hardship, which is going to get worse and worse over the next few years, people will start using it even more, I think, which is what's happening. So I don't think it's all bad. I think look at the queues, Tony, at the tills in the supermarkets. More and more people are queuing up like they used to. Are you noticing that? And paying. I've noticed a big change in people doing that. So I think there is a kickback. There really is. So let's all stay hopeful. I do think.
Oh, definitely, yeah. And of course, if you see some electronic device in a supermarket trying to stop you getting in unless you scan your iris or whatever, then you simply just don't use it. So that's almost in itself a lack of endorsement of any of the businesses that use this technology, may even just kill them off. Anyway,
absolutely.
Thanks ever so much for joining us again.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Tony.